So in the fall, I went to Malta, the second part of a trip to Turkey. And so the Malta consists of two islands, the island of Gozo, a smaller island, and the larger island of Malta. There is a third island that's more of a nature preserve. And we only spent 5 days on the ground there, but we should have spent at least 10 days on the ground because there's so much to see. There's good architecture, there's great archaeological sites, there's a lot of history, there's good food, and there's beaches and resorts. It's a wonderful place to visit, and I certainly would suggest going there. I first found out about Malta when I found out that the Queen and Prince Philip had lived there before she became Queen, and he was a naval officer. Since then, I'd run into some friends who had gone there before and loved it. And then at a reunion, I ran into an old friend whose father had actually piloted planes, Spitfires, into Malta during the Second World War, during the siege of Malta. So then I started reading up on it, and it was quite amazing, the country itself and all the history it had gone through. And so I was really pumped by the time I got there. This was the place to go. Malta's sitting in the middle of the Mediterranean and almost splits the western and eastern half of the Mediterranean. Its strategic location has saved Europe twice, once from the Ottoman Turks and the second from the German army. Rommel was coming through North Africa, and they needed the oil from the Middle East. And so because of Malta, by their submarines and planes, stopped the aid into Rommel. So he eventually got choked off because he had no supplies or oil to continue. So, and it's quite a story, Malta during the Second World War. Here are just some facts about the siege. When Malta started, 1941, Battle of Britain, just started to get over. What happened is the Allies had World War I technology. The planes were old planes, some of them used in World War I. Later in 1942, they had access. There were 3 airfields, 17 in the Germans. They had the best warplanes on the planet. They had a few planes, and the Germans had 800. They had troops and pilots. If someone didn't behave themselves in England, well, they sent them to Malta. So there was a whole bunch of undisciplined people, troops in Malta, and very few pilots. And the Axis had the best planes, the best battle-hardened troops, but they did win. And this is a picture of one of the planes that I got out of one of the books that I had been researching. And this Swordfish was the type of plane they started World War II with out of Malta. But apparently they had good acrobat or aerial maneuverability and did take out a number of Italian ships. In the follow-up of the battle, it was the most bombed place in the world. In fact, it had more bombs dropped on it than in the Battle of Britain, and mainly in the Grand Harbor alone. 3,000 bombing raids. King George gave them the George Cross for their bravery, the only time a country's won that. 10,000 homes were destroyed, and many immigrants. We actually ran into 2 Australian young men who were traveling in Malta to visit their relatives. And they had immigrated after the Second World War to Australia, which was kind of interesting. There were so much destruction. England paid for the restoration of the country. And the builders used the local stone in their type of architecture. And it was beautiful. I think the city of Valletta and the the neighboring towns are actually beautiful. They have like a honey gold stone, limestone that they use. And the harbor was probably the most beautiful harbor I've ever seen. It was just captivating the city itself. And it got independence in 1964. Okay. Anyway, this is a tribute to the submariners uh, who had given their lives during the battle, and they had done major damage to the Germans. And because of that, they were bombing the Grand Harbor because that's where the submarines were hidden. We were in this hotel called the Grand Harbor Hotel. We were the second windows up at the top, and we had windows facing both ways on the harbor. It was right over top of the fortifications, and you could see all around from there. This is one of the pictures I took out of our hotel window. There's a whole bunch of cruise ships that come in for the day. Well, I don't know how you could possibly do Malta in a day. It's impossible to do it justice. The harbor itself, you come in from the Mediterranean, but all of these ships have to be guided in by special pilots because it's difficult to maneuver around. There's fortifications as you enter the harbor. This is Fort St. Angelo, which is another fortification on the harbor. And there's all these little inlets coming off the harbor, and that's where they were hiding the submarines. And there's another little inlet coming out of the harbor again. Now it looks like more of the business area of the docks. But yet again, a lot of different places. So they had about 3 forts on this Grand Harbor. Here's the Victoria Gate that's at the bottom of the fortifications. And then to get back up, you have to take this modern elevator to get to the top. It's a view, it's called the Barak Gardens, Upper Barak Gardens. And here I am on that lookout. And you notice there's cannons on the bottom. Well, every day at noon and 4, they give a salute and shoot those cannons off. Here's some more pictures of the lookout in the gardens. And now this is the reason that I had to come and see the Lascaris war rooms, because I discovered that this place in Malta was where they coordinated the assault on Sicily. And my dad was in the assault on Sicily. Seen the places he fought in Sicily, but this was so I had to see where it all was planned and started. And these are pictures of the women and men who lived the war in the bunkers for the communications of the war. And here's their little bunker, the hallways where they lived during that time, where they plotted the strategy for the incoming bombardments, the communication systems. And here's some pictures that they have in their Lascaris war rooms about Operation Husky. And this is when it came. This is when they landed. The British, American, and Canadian troops landed on Sicily. And most of it was Canadian driven. They're Canadian ships here. And we came up the middle. Anyway, and then here they're saying Canada's contribution. A lot of the momentum that they needed, and at Pacino, where the Canadians landed. Also, Roosevelt and Churchill met here before the conference in Yalta. It's a Catholic country. It became Catholic when St. Paul actually came ashore because he got kicked out of all the other places in Greece and whatever, because he was kind of upsetting everybody. So he landed in Malta and was given some sanctuary. And there's actually a cave in Rabat that we never got to see, that he stayed in. So, and these little statues are on the corners of all the streets in Valletta, which is the main city on the harbor. It's English. The English got Malta during the Napoleonic Wars. That was part of their compensation for the Napoleonic Wars. And Malta got their independence in 1964. This is our neighborhood, and it's just beautiful. It's so nice, it's clean, and again, the honey gold of the buildings made it just beautiful. And a lot of hills, and when you're going down the hills or up the hills, they set little coffee shops and bars along the side of the street. So we would stop there and have a drink before we went back to get ready to go again for supper. And this was their local beer, CASK. And no matter what you were doing in Malta, it seemed like you were either going up, way up, or you're going down. Mostly it seemed like you were going up. At night, it just became beautiful. They had these lights all over at night. And the stairs, they had little cushions at the side. If there wasn't a bar, they had cushions at the side. You can order drinks and sit on the cushions and look down the stairs out over the harbor. It was just beautiful. The nights were lovely. Then we decided we would get a tour guide to take us around the southern half of the island. And it was Edmund's Garage. So Edmund came to get us, and we know we're in good hands when we have the Knight of St. John on the van here. And we had to make up a list of where we wanted to go. So we wrote up where we wanted to go, and we gave it to Edmund, who said, well, this is where we're going to go. We said, didn't you get our list? Oh, yes, he had got our list, but this was where we were going to go. So much for our list. But we had a good time anyway, and we did see lots. He showed us stuff that we didn't know was theirs. So we started in Valletta, the capital city on the Grand Harbor. We went south to Marischloch, a harbor, and then we went around and up to Medina, which is the old capital before Valletta became the capital. Another trip I got going north, we took a bus to Gozo another day, the island Gozo. But today we're just doing the southern part of the island. First off was the harbor, Marischloch. This 70% of the fishing vessels go out of this harbor. And this harbor was where Napoleon attacked Malta, and also where the Ottoman Turks came, was through this harbor. It's this was an interesting place we didn't really know about. It's called Gare de Lame, and it's a cave. Here are some World War II sentry towers, because in World War II, they used the cave to store their oil in, as it was safe. But these caves have teeth of Neanderthal people. It has pottery of 5200 BC. I didn't know they made pottery 5200 BC. But anyway, that's what I'm told. They also have bones from animals like a dwarf elephant or something, but most of the animals they're finding have roots to Europe. So they're thinking that, during the Ice Age, Malta was actually connected to Europe because of that. But it's quite amazing the finds that they're doing. Oh, and the pottery wasn't even found on the lowest level of the cave. It was sort of like in the middle level of the cave. So who knows how long this cave's been in use. This is some graffiti, not only left over by Roman soldiers, but also World War II soldiers. Now, this is interesting. All the little farms that they have little brick or stone walls around them. And because they're smaller plots and have stone walls, apparently when the Germans were bombing, it didn't do as much damage because a lot of the force of the bombs was sort of buffered by the stone walls. So I thought that was kind of interesting. Also, they have olive trees and they have their own wines. A very dry and barren. Sometimes it stands in for Greece and movies. Beautiful, beautiful ocean. People come here to dive because there's a lot of dives with all the shipwrecks and whatever around Malta, and snorkeling. Um, yes, so a lovely lookout here. And there's a cave in there. And if we had time, we could have taken the boat and gone in. But of course, Edmund had us on his list, so we had to keep going. I took this picture because for two reasons. First of all, if you look at the top half of the little caption, this is written in Maltese. Now, the syntax of the language is actually Arabic because there were Arab people living, like North Africans, living there for a number of years. It also has, believe it or not, Phoenician uh, words, Italian, French, and English. So it's a real mixture of languages. Um, so yeah, and when we were in a church once, they kept saying Allah. And so Maltese, even though they're Catholic, they use the word Allah for God, which quite I thought kind of interesting. So it's quite a mixture of languages. Now, the other reason I took it is what it says. The megalithic temples of Malta are the oldest freestanding stone monuments in the world. And they're used for this for the solstice. The two solstices. They back then they had access to it. So there are two temple complexes, Hagar Kim and Majandra temples. They're right on the ocean. And of course, they use the huge blocks, which they're just like Stonehenge. You don't know how they got there. The one on the far right is the largest block. What are they, 2000? I'm not going to say. I read once, but if I said this, I'd think no, I'm wrong or whatever. So I'm not going to give you an exact amount there. No, and they're just the stones, no mortar. And the little standing thing in the front is an altar. And in the back, although you may not be able to see it, there's a stone there that's got little circles on it. And that's sort of like the back of a chair. Some more pictures of it. Look, it's right by the ocean, beautiful views. They've got the canopy over the top to avoid ruin. And here along the side of the road is an old air, during the Second World War, it's their airstrip. And there's a museum already have. So anyway, guess it was a good idea. And then in the middle of the country is this lovely complex. It's an old walled city. It was Phoenician. It was Roman. The Arabs took over and built the walls, and it was the capital city until Valletta. So they made Valletta the capital city. And here's the main gate into it. They call it the Silent City, and it is very quiet. The walls are so tall, and the streets quite narrow, that it does sort of, dull the sound, and it's quite lovely. This square they used when they filmed the movie Napoleon, and it's also been used in Game of Thrones. And the church there, look at the buildings are lovely. And you can take a little carriage ride around the streets if you wished. And of course, a very elaborate church. Now, we didn't have any of these desserts, but we thought they looked very lovely. Instead, but what they do have are these honey rings with dates in the middle. And this is their sort of their national dessert, or what they're known for, honey rings. Also, what they eat a lot are called pastries, patises. And now they've got ricotta in these, but the ones I had smushed peas in, phyllo pastry with smushed peas. Also, another one of their foods is rabbit. Now, I had the rabbit stew, and I mean, I've eaten rabbit before, and I don't mind it. But I mean, if I was going to choose between having this lovely fresh fish that they cook or the rabbit, I would rather have the fish myself. Some more pictures of the streets in Medina. One thing he took us to that was really a surprise is that these gardens, and these gardens were made by the Grand Master of the St. John Knights. And now it was his palace, summer palace at one time. Now it's where the president of Malta lives, and she's a lady. And anyway, it was the grounds were lovely and looked like a nice place to live. But yes, the Grand Master of the Knights of St. John made that. The other thing associated with the Knights of St. John is Fort Elmo, which is right at the harbor. The entrance to the harbor, it's the big fortress. These are where some of the anti-aircraft guns were mounted during the Second World War. Now they're sitting on medieval walls. And I can't even imagine some poor guy sitting there with an aircraft gun waiting for miles and miles and miles of these bombers coming in constantly. And just, I don't know, I just can't even imagine doing that day after day after day. Siege of Malta about a year with the Germans just hammering them. And I just can't imagine being in one of these. I don't know. Anyway, better people than I. And this is a homage to the Knights of St. John, who, oh, no, no. Oh, I had a beautiful picture of the Crusaders, of the Knights of St. John and Crusaders. Darn it, and it didn't show. But where am I going here? I'm going the wrong way. Okay, here's where I want to be. Yeah. Anyway, the Knights of St. John started in their crusades. There were the Teutonic Knights, Knights of St. John. So anyway, but they were in charge of hotels and the medical facilities of the crusades. And they still exist today. They're in two parts. One part is the St. John ambulance, which Knights of St. John, and you notice that they have the same cross, which you would have seen. It was more of a money raising group for I don't know, humanitarian means. And their headquarters is Rome. And who is the Grand Master of the Knights of St. John now? A Canadian lawyer. I was quite surprised, but whatever. Anyway, the Knights of St. John during the Crusades, after the Crusades, they went to Cyprus. Well, then the Ottoman Turks kicked them out of Cyprus, and so they went to the island of Crete, or not Crete, Rhodes. So then the Ottoman Empire kicks them out of Rhodes. So then they're wandering all over Europe, and true European fashion, the Pope says, "Oh, well, you might as well go to the island of Malta. Here, have Malta." So off the Knights of St. John's went to Malta. And they became what they're called the nurse of the Caribbean. During the Crimean War, it was used as hospital, and First World War, they were used as hospital facilities. I think even Florence Nightingale spent some time here in Malta during the Crimean War. But anyway, Ottoman Turks decided they were going to take them out of Malta. And so they made their final stand at Fort St. Elmo here. And that's why they have the people there. They ended up fighting to the last man because John Vallette said, "You stand your ground. We're not surrendering. We're staying to the last man." And just as they were about to take the whole fort, Finally, France and Spain realized, oh my gosh, we better help Malta or we're in trouble. So they sent some forces in to help out. Not that they did anything. The Ottomans saw them and just ran. So, but didn't matter. John Villette and his St. John knights had retained Malta. And this is more pictures of Fort St. Elmo. And notice the walls. They were built by the knights. And across the inlet here is a place where they have lots of hotels, newer hotels. Nightlife is all here. They have a number of beaches and resorts down north of Valletta. And you're back to the Fort St. Elmo. Some of you may remember the film Midnight Express. I do, because it was so upsetting to me. And so it was filmed in this part of the fort, the barracks of the fort. And they had a museum with some armor from the Knights of St. John and some armor. Also, they have the King George cross that King George had given him for the Second World War. And this is the letter, the dedication letter, and the cross itself. So this has a very honored place in Fort St. Elmo. Then the church was closed, so off we went to the Grand Master's Palace. And this is where they stayed, the Grand Master stayed. Marble floors. And the museum had all of these, the knights' armors from over the years, the different kinds of armor. And the ceilings, you notice they've got the St. John cross in the ceiling there, the red and white one. Paintings all on either side. Here's the regalia of the Knights of St. John. This place, the Palace of the Grand Master, is now used as a place to entertain visiting dignitaries. And this is the room where they would meet. And beside the major chair there, above that, it looks like a banner, but it's also the flag of Malta, red and white. And then in the upper corner is a cross. And of course, that's the King George cross, which is on their flag. Then we get in this cute little boat. Looks like it's going to fall over, but we were taking our life in our hands, but everybody else was doing it. So anyway, we cross over to what's called the Three Cities, which are three little fingers sticking out into the Grand Harbor. And we're going to one in the middle called Vittorio. But we could have spent a whole day in each of these, one of these three cities. Through it all. And here's the church where John de Villette, who was the Grand Master of the St. John at the time of the Ottoman siege. This church was where they prayed and did a lot of their organization for the battle. And if you look around, there's different crosses of St. John's and pictures and things. And here, during the Ottoman siege, 1565, spiritual refuge for John de Villette. And of course, why they called the city Valletta is after John de Villette of the Knights of St. John. And we went there for supper. So there, at the very back, there's a little restaurant back there. So that's where we had supper. And it was a lovely night walking back. And there we are back on our little boat. You could take 6 people, no more. Look at these boats on the harbor. I mean, I can just imagine who's in those. I don't know. It's not me. And I like this building that's with the little arches going upwards. Then we're in our tiny little boat, and what comes by with this massive cruise ship Well, our guy put on the brakes of our little boat because we don't want to mess with this big guy coming through there. But anyway, I guess there's room for everybody on the harbor. This is another little fortress here too. Anyway, so the two places we didn't see on the South Island was Rabat. That was another major city, and it had St. Paul's grotto where he was hiding out. And so it has a lot of those things. It has catacombs in it. The city of Malta we wanted to go to because the cathedral there, it's a Malta dome, a beautiful dome, huge dome. But its claim to fame is during the Second World War, a bomb came, when they were having mass, a bomb came right through the dome and planted itself in the middle of the congregation, but it never exploded. So now they have the bomb over to the side, and you can go into the church. So, or yes, yes, exactly. But our tour guide, it wasn't on his list, so we didn't see it. Anyway, so the next day we're heading. We take the bus up here, and then we take a ferry over to the island of Gozo. And again, we missed the ferry because we only go so many times, and somehow we missed the ferry, so we had less time on line. Anyway, we needed at least 3 days just alone in Gozo. So yet again, we shortchanged ourselves. There's so much to see on this island, so much to do, and so much a variety of things to do that I can't believe that we were only on the ground 5 or 6 days. It's, yeah. So here's our first look at Gozo. Very dry. Yet again, we're going in the dry season in October, but I don't think it's too much more rain comes onto. Although this past couple of weeks, they had a major storm come through. They had actual snow in Malta. Never snowed in Malta. They had snow, and all the seaside towns had the huge waves coming right over the sidewalks on the island. So we're going to these UNESCO World Heritage Site, Giganta Temples, the Gigantia Temples Heritage Park. And this tells you how old these things are in Malta. These temples and the ones we saw before are, 3600 BC. The Stonehenge was 2000. So 1500 years before Stonehenge, they built these temples. And the pyramids, 2500 BC. So 1,000 years before the pyramids, this Gigantian temple and the other temples were built. It looks in very much disrepair, not like the Hagar Quinn that we went to before. These are really not much better. But I suppose if you're that old, I mean, you've got some excuse for not looking too good. But they're doing work on it, and you can walk in and look at the altars and the sacrifice places. Another place too that they're doing excavation work on the main island, but you have to book 6 months in advance to get it. And we were booking 4 months. There's no way we could get in to see this other one on the island. But anyway, so there's so many archaeological sites. It's quite amazing. More stone walls. Beautiful seascapes in Gozo. And they have a lot of beach resorts here too. This was a little cove, but it was also a tourist site. So there were a lot of hotels around here for swimming and boating and so on. 1 million British people come every winter to Malta. This was the main city called Victoria that is in the island of Gozo. And it yet again is Phoenician, Roman, Arab, and Knights of St. John. And it's a walled city with, of course, the church And the walls around, you can walk the walls to see the island. Now, when the Ottoman Turks came to Malta, they went to Gozo first and captured this city. But the city thought, oh, well, we'll surrender and they'll give us good terms and we'll just go somewhere else. Well, no, the head of the Ottoman Turks was actually a Barbary pirate. He killed everybody or put them into slavery, which is why John de Valette said, no way we're going to surrender. You're going to stay in that fort to the last man, because no one's just going to kill you or take you off slavery. You might as well stand and fight. So anyway, this fort was taken by the Ottomans. But again, look at it's a lovely little city and one to wander around. I mean, I think Gozo needs minimum 3 days just for Gozo. It's the whole islands are just wonderful. Well, anyway, so we get back. We left Valletta and it was normal. We come back and the main square has all of these kiosks with food and drink, and a stage was being set. And this is their main fountain, the Triton Fountain. And we thought, well, what the heck's going on? Well, then it's their national holiday the next day. So this is like Ottawa. They're setting up for their Ottawa Canada Day celebration. Of course, here we've got the Cis Beer float or place. But we were so tired after that day in Gozo. I would have loved to have come back here and spent the evening. I mean, this was wonderful. This was a place to be. This is Party Central. And we were so tired. All we wanted to do was go to bed. So this is their Parliament buildings. Modern, quite modern. And they put up all these flags while we were away too. I guess just for celebrating their local saint. Well, we wake up the next morning, thought we'd just go to the cathedral. Well, there the horse guards are out and the marching bands are out. And all these important cars are outside the cathedral. Well, we can't get into cathedral yet again. We didn't go one day because the lineups were too long. So, oh, well, let's go early one morning. So we get up early one morning ready to go to this church. Meanwhile, we've got marching bands and everything else going on. You can't get into the church because it's some ceremony or whatever for the day, for their Canada Day, Malta Day or whatever. So we had breakfast looking at the church. And we decided, let's go to the Archaeological Museum, which was really good. So, you know, those little circular stones that we saw in Hagar Kim. Well, here they are. And there's that altar stone that was in the picture. These are little carved stone women, probably fertility gods that were found in all of those temples that we saw. And these are all little statuettes from those temples. Here was a little necklace that they had found, very similar to the one in Turkey that they found from the Stone Age. This one was quite amazing to me. Look at the carving and the detail. And this was found, this is like 4000 BC. And here's this carving being done. And I think this is quite amazing, the detail and the carving in this temple period. And yet again, there's a round stones. I think and look at these look like our Indian hammers from the prairies. And they're implements from the temple period, 3600 to 2500 BC. These look like what we find in Waccamaw from our natives. The building alone was lovely. Look at the ceiling on that. Also in this museum was they found a Phoenician boat, remains of a Venetian boat wreck. And so they had all of the items from that in this museum. It was a very good museum. And certainly I'm kind of glad we got kicked out of the church because this was worth going to. We come out, well, the cars are still there. And there's people still milling around. And there was a security one. So we knew somebody important was in there. Well, these guys didn't look like anything very important. Well, these two look quite important. They were, escorted by themselves. And I thought, well, maybe that's the woman president because, it's a woman president. She's got all this security on her, I bet you. And then I said, Well, she's wearing something rather suggestive to be a president of the country. Well, everybody's waving and clapping. And I thought, well, that's kind of odd. Anyway, no, the main car's still there after all this. Well, here she is. Here's the president of Malta right there. So we were waiting, and we did see her, and here she is in her car, the back seat of her car. She's waving and going to do the next thing, which led us to the next dilemma. We could get into the church. We couldn't get into the museum. It was closed for the day, but we could get into the church, but we had to pretend we were going to church. So we couldn't go wander around into all the side things taking pictures. So we sat in the back row and took a lot of Zoom pictures. But so that some of them are kind of not that great. But anyway, this is a massive cathedral. On the floor, those little square rectangles are made of marble, but they are the burial sites of the Knights of St. John's. They're buried there. And of course, they've got the name on them or something. And the ceiling was painted by an Italian painter who came to live in Malta, Preti, Preti, I guess. Anyway, as you look through, you can see different things of the Knights of St. John. And this became their major cathedral after the one that we saw across the harbor where John de Valette was. That one, this then became the Knights of St. John's major cathedral. And they're completely out of focus, but whatever. This is the ceiling painted by Preti. All the gold and the altar pieces. And every once in a while, you'll see and here's the big piece of art, a Caravaggio, the beheading of John the Baptist. The Caravaggio, I guess, spent some time in Malta as well. And this is one of his largest paintings, I guess. Here we've got another cross of the Knights of St. John. So anyway, we're glad we got into Cathedral. We were sorry we didn't get to see more or go into the museum to see the Caravaggio. But anyway, when we came out, we had another thrill. It's something that I'd never seen before, I'd heard about. Anyway, because all these, the flags are out to honor their patron saints. And well, isn't this guy, he's the happiest cross bearer I've ever seen. He's just so excited. Here he is leading the parade, and he doesn't get any happy. But what in the heck are the skull and crossbones doing on the bottom of his cross is what I'd like to know. Here, I'm going to take it back one picture. I'm not quite sure. I'll have to look into that one because that's very odd. Anyway, so coming behind him, we have the church dignitaries. And here we have their patron saint coming along, carried by the locals, marching bands. Anyway, that was quite a fun thing to have happen. I was so glad we lucked into getting to their national holiday because I thought it really added something, even if we didn't get into the. Now, the last place we visited was what made the Knights of St. John famous, and that is their hospitals. Now, when they bombed Malta, Valletta, they got a lot of the top levels. Well, the rich people had the hospital beds on the upper part. The poor people were in the basement. So the poor people's area of the hospital actually is intact with the original floors and so. But each of the patients had their own bathrooms. The beds were beside their own bathrooms. And also the Knights did a lot of work with honey to take away infection and salt on wounds. So they were actually kind of ahead of their time in a lot of their medical procedures and work. Here is actually a picture of the number of the bed, the original bed. 114 dead in the hospital of the original hospital. Well, this is also in the hospital on one of the upper floors. What it is a reception, and it's a reception for the European Union's financial ministers who are having a conference that week in Malta. And Malta's part of the European Union, and this was their year to be chairperson of the European Union. That was, like when we were there in October. And so anyway, Malta is still pulling its weight, and a very important part of Europe, as Western Europe has found twice in their history. Don't discount Malta, you need them. Anyway, those are all the pictures I have to show of Malta, but it was a fascinating trip, and one that you certainly need a lot of time to see, because there's so much in that country to see.